Hi there, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. And now this is our second video in Module 12, looking at the topic of accounting. And in this video, I thought it might be useful right up front to answer the question you see here: what is the difference between accounting and finance? You may have heard both of these terms used in business, referring to financial activity, and you may be wondering, what is the real difference between these two functions? Can these terms be used synonymously? What's the difference between them? And if I'm making a decision about what I should major in or what I should pursue in a career, is there one or the other that might be more interesting to me? Let's see if we can answer some of those questions in this lecture today. So, you know from our previous video, the textbook will define accounting as the collecting, analyzing, and communication of financial information. Now, we can distinguish that from finance because a typical definition of finance would be the acquisition, investment, and uses of capital for business use. And you can sort of see here how just from these bare definitions, there really is a distinct difference between these two functions. The first, about collecting, analyzing, and communicating financial information, which, by the way, we mentioned in the previous video, really does focus on historical events that have already happened, whereas finance deals with the acquisition, investment, and uses of capital for business use. Now, of course, even at this point, you may be asking yourself, well, what do you mean by capital? And by capital, what we really mean is money. Money and other assets that can be used in the production of products and services for business use. In other words, you need capital in order to accomplish anything in business. In order to build a factory, in order to pay laborers, in order to obtain training, buy buildings, buy assets, you need capital for those kinds of things. That's really what finance is about, whereas accounting is about a distinctly different type of activity, which we've talked about just a little bit in the first lecture, and we'll talk about it more today. So between these two, between accounting and finance, there's first of all a difference in focus that I want to point out. Accounting focuses, as you can see on the slide, on the day-to-day flow of money in and out of a company. It attempts to keep score or measure, remember that whole equation we talked about, right? To measure the inflows and outflows of money into a company. And remember the old adage, right? Of course, you cannot improve what you cannot control. You cannot control what you cannot first measure. Accounting is about measuring the day-to-day flow of money in and out of a company. But the focus of finance is significantly different. Finance, as a function, focuses on managing assets and liabilities and planning for future growth. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I'm going to acquire assets, I typically have to trade something in order to get those assets. In other words, if I'm going to acquire a factory, I have to trade something in order to acquire it, and typically that's money, right? It doesn't have to be money. It could be a future promise to pay you money in the future. It could be something else, right? But in order to acquire those assets for future growth, I have a natural corollary or an exchange of a liability for that. And that's what the focus of finance is, to focus on that with an eye to future growth. So first of all, a difference in focus. Second of all, a difference in perspective. Now you see from this picture, at first glance, this may be a little dizzying, but what are we looking at in the picture? In the picture, what we're looking at is a car looking through the windshield as the car speeds forward, while we also have the view of the rear view mirror looking behind us. And the reason I give you this image, of course, is because accounting takes the perspective of looking backwards at historical events and data, stuff that's already happened that we can measure, while as finance holds a forward-looking perspective of future cash flows in order to plan for growth, to plan for what the eventual return on an investment might turn out to be. And we're looking at future cash flows that have not yet happened, and quite frankly, may not really happen quite the way we hope, right? We know this. Anytime we talk about the future, we can't really predict the future with 100% precision. So there's always a degree of risk involved, that things may not quite turn out the way that we had hoped and planned for. But you can see here then, just at a baseline foundational level, accounting and finance have two significantly different perspectives. One looks backwards, the other looks forward. Therefore, for those of us who are perhaps contemplating majoring in accounting versus majoring in finance, there are differences in the education you will need to secure. Accounting majors will take classes, a lot of classes, to learn the standardized rules of accounting, standardized and known as generally accepted accounting principles. You'll need to know the theory and practice of how to use these rules in real life. You'll also take classes in business law, tax law, ethics, and auditing. Whereas finance majors will take a different set of classes. Typically, finance majors will take lots of classes in corporate finance, theory of money and banking, international finance. You need to have a comprehensive understanding of macroeconomics. It really is a different track of classes versus accounting majors. And I can tell you this because, as I've told you, I got my bachelor's degree with a major in accounting and finance, as well as a third emphasis in corporate management. And accounting majors go down a whole different track than finance majors. And certainly when you talk about some core classes, there is a little bit of overlap, but really you are being trained for two entirely different professions, and therefore you take entirely different sets of classes. Now, even now, as you look at this list of classes, for some of you, you may be drawn towards, you may resonate better with the kinds of description of classes I've given you for accounting majors, while as others of you listening to this very same lecture may really feel drawn to and resonate with the kinds of topics I've listed for finance majors. And that's great, because we see accounting and finance as complementary partners, not adversaries. Like a left hand and a right hand working together, accounting and finance work together to learn from the past and plan for the future. Therefore, any healthy organization, any healthy business needs both accounting and finance functions working well and working well together. Now, I'll tell you, none of this content is in the textbook. So I do want you to familiarize yourself with the slide deck and with this lecture video, because this is really important for you as a business major for your career planning. You may look at this and say, my heart, my interests are really drawn towards accounting, and that is awesome. As an accounting major, I congratulate you, and I hope you really are able to make that journey and become an accounting major. While others of you may look at it and say, accounting maybe not so much, but finance, man, all that future-looking stuff, that really does whet my appetite. That really does resonate with me. To which, of course, I would also tell you, congratulations. As a finance major, man, I'm really happy for you, and I hope that you are able to go far as a finance major. Or you may be listening to this lecture and saying, you know what, I'm taking this module because I have to, but I have no interest in being either an accounting or a finance major. I'd rather do something else in business rather than either of those two functions. To which I would tell you, awesome, that's wonderful, because professionally in my career, I was never an accountant or in the finance department. But you need to understand how accounting and finance work and work together to better understand how performance is measured and how performance and future performance is strategized for and planned for by the finance department. Those two functions working together will help you to better understand how does money work in a business. Hope that helps some. We'll see you in the next lecture.